All right. Well, we're back with another PCBH Corner, and my mind cannot be more excited right now for Dr. Stephen Hayes to be joining us. It's interesting, Dr. Hayes. We always do kind of intros and things like this. My mind actually laughs about doing an intro, but I do want to tell this quick story. And I put this in the email originally. Back when I was in grad school, this would have been like 14 years ago. We were in our histories and systems class, and we had to do a paper on someone in the field. And I was really big into ACT there, and obviously following Kirk and Patty because we were getting into primary care and had read a lot. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to just do one on Stephen Hayes. And I sent an email that I thought there was no way that it would be a response. And good God, did I get a response? It wasn't just even like a quick, like I put some questions in there. It was like a detailed history of your background and your journey. And it's something that my mind has always appreciated about one, just how caring of an organization that, the people that make up the Association for Contextual Behavioral Sciences is. And just one of those things like for students or people early in their careers, like reach out because you never know. Like you never know what the response is going to be. You might get a whole page back. So I know, and this is an exciting moment too, because Dr. Hayes was just telling me that retirement's here. Real quick, Dr. Hayes, do you want to say like what you're working on right now? Like any kind of introduction you think that would be useful? Again, I think everybody knows who you are, but anything your mind says it would be good just for the audience watching.
Yeah, well, I've been in the academy for more than 40 years, and it's coming to the end of that phase. But I really think my most important work is ahead of me because I think we've dialed down into an issue that's really, really important of how do we measure and model processes of change in a way that can empower individuals and be more effective in more efficient ways, not just in mental health, but behavioral health and in social wellness and all the areas where, people need to be lifted up and empowered. So I've been moving hard into a process-based approach, which has always been part of ACT, been there from the beginning because it's part of, functional behavior analytic kind of thinking. But now realizing that in order to really do that well, we have to radically change our statistical models and we have to find ways to develop nudges and bumps that can help not the 1 out of 5 who have some sort of latent disease label thrown at them, which is mostly nonsense, but the 5 out of 5 who need help in living a more empowered life. So that's
What
what I'm up to.
Oh, I love that the 1 out of 5, which I couldn't agree more about the useless list that we have with that. But the 5 out of 5 that need help, I love that, and that's going to be. I mean, that's really what my mind. When I was talking to some of my colleagues about reaching out and getting you on a corner, was this idea of like really taking a conversation about this process-based approach, which you've been talking about. I mean, as you said, like ACT
Yeah.
has been that from the beginning, but really highlighting in some recent articles and I'm just excited to pick your brain about that. So maybe my first question for the audience members and particularly people working in primary care that might not be familiar with this kind of shift that is occurring a little bit more in what we might say evidence-based kind of ways of doing psychotherapy. What is causing this shift from moving forward more with a process-based approach versus what we might have done like a protocolized kind of algorithmic approach?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, although we were out of the gate early and we've been pushing on it, it's happening now in so many areas. It's kind of like what happened at that moment where I said the third wave had arrived. And I said that after we had a grand total of 4 randomized trials on ACT, we now have 1,200. But you could look around and see something really fundamental was changing in the CBT world, especially, but evidence-based therapy more generally. It's happening again. I don't know if anybody's going to use a wave label. I have not used the wave label, but it's happening again. And I've been through these things enough to be able to feel the ground trembling. And why? I think it's because our top-down normative models are not producing progress. Our effect sizes are stable or falling. Number one. Number two, especially post-COVID, when we realize, everybody needs mental resilience support. There's just no way you can mount that without being way more efficient and focused in how you do it. Number three, the DSM is a dead man walking Uh,
Amen.
you can only go
Amen.
so many. You can only go so many decades before you say, wait a minute, we haven't discovered even a single disease. And that's the whole point of syndromes, is so that you can get a functional entity corralled to call it a disease. Well, then what is the purpose of it? And then the final one, the really dagger through the heart. And this is the one where I've been working on this for 10 years, the process-based approach, really, really heavily and hard. It's been implicit all along, but is I've come to find and been shocked to see that our normative statistics and the way that we've been doing our randomized trials and figuring out what is the best evidence-based standards of care are fundamentally flawed. They have
Hmm.
assumptions they can't meet. We're told that certain ways of, excuse me, certain ways of handling the individual, or the way that you can highlight and focus on the individual. And when we dig in, we find that no, those methods don't solve the problem, they make it worse. And so it's kind of like a way I would describe it would be like if you were walking by a really tall skyscraper every day, and one day you looked down and you saw that in the foundation there was little cracks, and then you came back the next day and the crack was bigger, and you came back the next day and the crack was bigger, and you looked up and there's thousands of people in this skyscraper. At some point, you may say, "This is important. We've got to do something about it," and that's where we are. Is that there's a small group of us, but it's going to spread, and you can see it happening in the field. Now realize we will never be able to get better at what we're doing by the ways that we've been taught to do it. So we got to break the mold and hopefully get everybody out of that skyscraper before it falls down.
Can I ask you this? And my mind says not to ask this question. Fuck it, I'm going to ask it. I think this will be how much, because this is something I talk about with our trainees a lot. Like, how would we know if we were wrong from the beginning? Like, if we were to start over, because again, as you said, like we have so much stuff that is built on these things, these concepts that we took as truths, which is ironic for us, from the ACBS kind of world, like, this functional contextualism kind of approach about, hey, truth criterion, and which should only be if it's functional, and clearly it's not serving a function anymore. Like, we're not getting better, we're not reaching more people. How much, this might not be a useful question, so let me know if you don't want to answer this, and that's totally fine. How much do you feel like we actually know right now? Like, how much do you feel like we actually know in the realm of helping people? What helps
Yeah,
people?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great question. Sometimes what you know when something's wrong before you know what is right. And
Hmm.
so I feel really confident in saying that we know that the road we've been on is wrong and it's not going to ever be right, because it
Hmm.
can't be, because it's mathematically invalid. Uh, how best to turn and go in another direction? Well, I think we have some indications early.
Hmm.
Here's some examples. Just take the primary care integration work that Kirk and Patty are doing. That we know that small nudges and bumps, if they're focused well, can have a big impact in changing the trajectory of people's. That's one thing. So it's not necessarily big one size fits all protocols, but it's something that's more fitted to the individual. How? Well, functional analysis is the way we usually call it, but how do you actually do that? Two, I think we are learning that individualization gives you, even when it's done without any guidance other than just turning clinicians loose to take the elements that are seem to be most applicable and relevant, and getting our clients to be able to give us some feedback about, this is what I really want and this is helpful. That already improves the effect sizes. And then the third one is that when you shift from signs and symptoms to biopsychosocial processes of change,
Hmm.
realize that you can step up to this challenge of the 5 out of 5, because there's so many gatekeeper areas where people can get a little bit of information or a little step forward that's going to pay off in area after area. So if you can get something from your primary care physician, you can get something from your diversity, equity, inclusion training.
Oh yeah.
You can
Oh
get
yeah.
something from, when you go to the dentist, or when you sit in a workshop at work about how to be a better employee, and on it goes. Uh, you know, you don't have to. It turns out that the number of processes that make a big difference are relatively small. The number of manifestations of processes gone badly are ginormous. So
And
we can greatly simplify and kind of one small bite at a time, learn how to create more mentally resilient people who are more caring and supportive and kind to themselves and others. And if you can do that, the whole culture starts to shift. And, we have a chance to step up to this 5 out of 5 challenge.
it becomes scalable in a lot of ways. And I know we were talking a little bit before we even started on. I've been trying to, Jessica Slider from Northwestern University wrote a great book recently, Little Treatments, Big Effects. And
Yeah.
when they interview patients, and this is the thing that's also interesting, right? When they interview patients, they talk about how what patients want is care that's accessible, that they feel seen and valued and heard, that they are provided options that supports their autonomies, that care is flexible and dynamic, it's not protocolized and rigid. And the last thing is, and I really love this, is that it focuses on psychohealth rather than psychopathology. And that's where, like, you're describing this, like, just aligns perfectly again with what patients have said. This is what we would want. We would want this care that would look like this.
Yeah, another study, a meta-analysis I can give you that can amplify those big three, and they're good, is that when it goes awry, when you ask people who've had bad experiences with
Mm.
interventions, and you ask why, more than 2/3 say that's because it didn't fit them. And then if you ask the other questions, they have the same theme, that it wasn't applicable. It was too hard to do, so that goodness of fit for the person. Now add in the cultural part.
Mhm.
I'll just give you an example. I mean, if you're working with indigenous peoples, let's say in North America, and you're going to be doing values work, well, depending on where you are, their values view and their traditions are completely different than what they are from the weird world studies. So if you're going to be making a list of like, here are the values, instead of asking, listening, measuring, modeling in words and in ways that fit the person, you're just going to miss the opportunity to help move that human life. And we're in this situation where 96% of the psychology literature comes from 12% of the world's population. It comes from the Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, in quotes, let's hope, countries. Well, the weird world is weird. The weird world is not the whole world.
Hmm.
So, how do we build something that really fits, empowers, lifts up, and do it in a way that's bite-sized? And, I've worked with Kirk and Patty for a long, long time. Kirk, you know, uh, was there in a big workshop I did at the University of Washington, really fresh coming out of my panic disorders and stuff. Important workshop because Kirk was there, Patty was there, so was
They
Neil.
told me about this. They've shared this story. Yeah, I'd love to know your side, though. I'd love to know. Yeah,
I've
yeah.
actually got the tapes right over here. I actually got it filmed, and
Oh,
I'm gonna put it up for public consumption so people can see. It was pretty interesting because I remember having 3 little mini panic attacks during the talk itself, but I was able to do it. And uh, the kind of a point of that is that Kirk early on, as he gravitated in this way, had a real nose for keeping it simple.
mhm.
And you're looking at a geek. I've learned how to talk English more recently, but when he first met me, boy, I couldn't read the sentences I wrote. So it's changed, and it really, I think we do need to figure out a way to sort of talk in ways and give people what they need in ways that are short, that are easy, that are simple, and yet behind the scenes fit with the best science that we know statistically, mathematically, that we know that we're targeting processes that are relevant for this person. We know when we've moved them, and we know if the outcomes change, why they changed. That combination of simple, repeated, direct, and good idiographic data that's scaled into nomothetic generalizations, we had to make up a word for that. We call it idionomic. I think has a chance when you say, do we know really what to do? I think it has a chance. I can't really say we can prove it yet, but we know at least it doesn't violate its own assumptions, as what we have been doing, has a chance to change the conversation about mental and behavioral health and social wellness in ways that empowers future generations rather than shoves them into more top-down normative categories that are ill-fitting suits.
So let me ask you this, because my mind just pictures, people watching this and people that reach out about these corners that we shoot. And one of the things I always say, like, what would look different? Like if like in a visit, in a clinical interaction, what would look different if we approach this? Which obviously almost is probably an ironic question because it would depend on the context and the human that's coming in. But what would look different? What does your mind say would look different?
Well, let's say I think we can distill the processes that are really important down to creating more flexibility. And flexibility is variation that fits the context and moves you towards your goal.
Hmm.
So it's not just random variation. We're not talking about chaos. We're talking about, being able to navigate a complex world and over time evolve your life. Flexibility in the area of emotions, thoughts, attention, sense of self, motivation, and overt behavior. And by the way, take care of your relationships and take care of your body. What I
Hmm.
just said accounts for almost 100% of every study ever done in the history of the world about how change happens from a psychosocial intervention. And I know that because we did a review of every single study that ever had done a mediational analysis. It took us 3 years to do it, looked at 55,000 studies, scored each one of them twice. That do not do this at home. This is this
And what
is
were the things again? So you said take care of your body's relationship, and then the flexibility that we have with obviously the internal
Yeah, well, I'll
processes.
say it in a way that's more pillars than points. Learn to
Okay.
be more emotionally and cognitively open, to be
Okay.
aware in the present moment consciously, and be able to allocate your attention in a way that's flexible, fluid, and voluntary, and be able to determine what really brings meaning and purpose into your
Uh,
life, and how to build habits around it. And then make sure that you scale those to your relationships and take care of your body. The
let's
end,
go.
period.
Let's
The end,
go.
period. I mean, it accounts for everything we know. If you allow me a little bit of flexibility, I'll give you an example. Cognitive reappraisal. Historically, some wings of CBT and the third wave have tussled over that. No, we know that cognitive reappraisal is really a form of cognitive flexibility. It's not a fight inside your head to get rid of your negative thoughts. It's simply being able to think a variety of thoughts, take what's useful, leave the rest. Well, I'll give you another example, emotional acceptance and openness and being able to learn from our feelings. We come into the world yearning to feel. It's important. It's a way that we can socialize each other. We create language of emotion to help do this. We have to teach our kids to know what they're feeling so that they can tell us what they need or want, and we can be part of a group. Well, it turns out it isn't just being open to your feelings, it's also not clinging to the positive ones. Because if you grasp and grab, oh, I only want, well, it loses its signal value. It's like forcing the light on your car to always, show that everything's fine, even when you ran out of oil and your
Right. Just putting something.
radiator's
Yeah.
overheating.
Yeah.
Bad idea. Just a bad idea. No, for it to function, it has to go up and down. That's what emotions are for. And so clinging to the so-called positive makes you miserable. It's not happy, number one. Number two, you eliminated the information value. So as we dig into it and we really look at, just name a process you care about. Just name one. In fact, give me a challenge, throw me a curveball, and I think I'll be able to fit it into that one long sentence that I said earlier.
Oh man, like a process that I care about.
Anything you care about that you think, man, this is important. People
Like,
really need to learn how to do this, where what we're talking about are the
dude,
micro steps you take
you know
that
what's
would
going to
lead
be
you in a
hilarious?
direction.
What's going to be hilarious? I don't have it because my mind, as soon as I started reading a lot of the process-based stuff, I was like, this is the shit that we're talking about. But I will say one of the things that, maybe some of our trainees, our psych interns and our
Yeah,
fellows would say, let's just say behavior activation. That behavior activation that is, vital and important, we'll say. Yeah.
absolutely. So this is a kind of behavioral flexibility in the presence of
Uh,
things that are repertoire narrowing. You wouldn't need behavioral activation if you're already fully activated. So why is this? Here's an example. I mean, Neil Jacobson's dismantling of cognitive therapy, behavioral activation could beat the full CBT protocol with the most severe. The late Neil Jacobson, he was a warrior, man. He was a good friend, and he was at intern at Brown, right overlapped with him when I was on my internship. And in fact, I was scheduled to go and meet with him to talk about a revolution that I was trying to mount, which became the third wave
Yeah.
when I got the call that he had died.
Mhm.
And so I canceled my plane ticket and spent some time crying. He was a real warrior, but he had this idea that what he was going to be able to do is literally get people off the street, teach them to be coaches, and just focus on behavioral activation and see
Yeah.
if he can beat board certified CBT. It's the kind of thing that was really,
Oh,
you know,
what an idea, right? Yeah.
he would have done it. And
Yeah.
you know what? It would have succeeded.
Yeah.
It would have succeeded because that simple message of get out of your chair, step up, look around, step forward towards what? Well, you could almost say almost anything, but what's inside behavioral activation is always towards something that has at least some positive features. Take a nature walk,
Mhm.
take a bath, you know, talk to a friend, anything, but it has something in there that might be intrinsically meaningful. Well, that breaks you out of this depressive spiral down, where you're waiting for your life to start instead of getting up and starting your life. And so I think when we are able to be more emotionally cognitive open, when we're able to be more aware of what's around us, it's easier to be activated. And so if you look at behavioral activation circa Neil Jacobson as opposed to, let's say, Peter Lewinson, what's different? What's different is you're adding some acceptance and mindfulness skills, and values are in there. And that's because Neil and Kirk and I mean, the big dismantling study, who was first done at Group Health at Puget Sound, who
Mhm.
was the chief therapist? Patty Robinson, Kirk Strassel. I mean, and what was going on at the same time? Well, Neil and I and Kirk and so forth were talking about all these new ideas that became the third wave. So the behavioral activation, as we know it now, modern behavioral activation, is slightly third waveized or actified, focus on getting your overt behavior going in a way that you can contact your world in a different and more uplifting way.
You
So
know,
yeah, that fits.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the thing that I love about this conversation so much, and I love that you even called, when I was able to do my fellowship with Kirk, well, Kirk was brilliant, undoubtedly. The things that he always said, is like, stop trying to be brilliant. Like, you don't need to be brilliant. And we get caught up in that as a provider so much, especially when, like us working in primary care, there's so much conversation about what you can help with and what you can't help, what you can and can't help with. And largely that comes down to like this idea that we can quantify complexability, or how complex something is. And then that turns into, it's like, well, if something's really complex, we got to do more complex interventions. Like we got to do more complex like algorithms and protocols and different things. And one of the things I really loved is like even the point of care resource up to date when it talks about helping people with manage multi-morbidity. So this is even from the medical research, right? This is like a
Yeah.
bio approach that someone has multiple morbidities. They say that the best approach is probably like keeping it simple. Like any attempt to do all these things, it just overwhelms patients. It causes them to disengage. Just keep it simple. And that's such a powerful thing that we often just miss off the time.
Well, complexity understood in terms of our data analytic tools and so forth, if it simplifies, is not really complexity. I'll give you just kind of a metaphor. Suppose you had a knot in front of you, been all tied up, and you probably had this experience, and you're looking at it, and you need to untie it. One thing you could do is just grab anything and pull. Yeah, but you may be grabbing the thing that actually makes it tighter. If you've
Mm.
ever done that with a complex knot,
Oh yeah.
well, it can look a little complex to figure out, wait a minute, what goes over and under and around and through such that one, if I pull that one, this whole thing's going to loosen up and I'm going to be able to then pull that one. The whole thing will come apart. And you probably had that experience sometimes. Well, turns out I think we can take things like dynamical systems and complex networks, and it can put you through something that if you're a statistician would be complex. But the bottom line is very simple because it says, here's the process that's most important for this person right now.
Well, oh,
If
buddy.
I'll give an example that we have that we built into two apps that I've been building. This is what you asked me what I'm doing with my life. What I'm doing
Yeah,
with my
yeah.
life.
Let's do it.
I'm doing with my life is creating a forward-facing clinician support app that allows you to give nudges and bumps to your clients that are targeted to processes. And then in it is plugged in a thing that we call MindGrapher that comes from a 501c3 that's 47 years old that I'm president of, that Institute for Better Health, a charitable organization committed to improving mental and behavioral health care. It's called MindGrapher. And okay, so here's one of the tools that we have. If you simply are willing to say what's going on in your life, let's say once a day or twice a day, it'd take you all of about 3 minutes each time, answer a few questions, little finger swipes on your phone, ding, ding, ding. We're able to take artificial intelligence, machine learning methods within that data stream only. We're only looking at you, only at you. So we're not comparing you to anybody else. And we can see, hey, you know, when you do this, your life is lifted up. When you do that, your life is pushed down with regard to the thing that you came and cared about. You'll be answering questions about what you really want, not just about the processes. Well, then we put it through this machine learning algorithm using a thing called a random forest procedure that almost nobody uses in psychology. They use it in artificial intelligence work and in computer science, business, and so forth. And we've added in a correction called Baruda that makes sure that you don't overfit. Because when you're modeling an individual, if they have a couple bad days, you see this all the time. Somebody comes in and says, man, I cannot eat, mushrooms. If I eat mushrooms, everything, it happened once or twice. It's a fluke. It has nothing to do with mushrooms, dude. But you've probably done it yourself, where you start spinning these tales about what lifts you up, push you down. Well, what the algorithms that we're using does is it filters that out by creating this a little more geek than you'd probably want.
Oh, this is exciting though. I love
Okay,
it.
well,
Yeah,
what it
no,
does.
keep it going. Keep it going. Yeah.
Okay, well, I love this thing. This is so cool. I
No
love it.
doubt. No doubt.
It's called Baruda. It's a correction that for the first time ever has been used idiographically in the work that I'm doing for IBH in the lab that I'm working with. Joe Sorochi is one of the main statisticians, Baldinder Sadra, others, Cristobal Hernandez. Anyway, so let's say, so you're trying to model whether or not, let's say, I'll just post something out. Let's say emotional openness has something to do with, let's say, stress and burnout. Okay, so I'm asking a couple times a day, and I'm just tracking it over time. You don't want to have a thing where you happen to have a bad day or happen to have a good day, distorting the whole thing. And so what it does is it creates another variable, a shadow variable of, let's say, emotional openness. It's not exactly how it works, but it's close enough. Takes the same data, scrambles them randomly, and then models that over time.
And then models. Okay.
And what the random forest does is a wonderful thing. It simply says, don't confuse me. I don't care about the shape of a distribution, the interactions, all of that. Just tell me, in all of these variables you fed in, is there one that you can find a value that it sorts good and bad into high and low in about a 50-50 way? So about half of the good days, half of the days, the good days are up here, half of the bad days are down here. What variable would do that best? Okay. Well, the shadow variables have the same data, but they're scrambled. So it should never work. Your special little thing, oh, I love acceptance, it's so important, has to beat the shadow variables. So it's kind of like what we're going to do is, let's say we have 6 variables, like in the psychological flexibility model, that, and imagine they're like 6 dogs in a race, and they're chasing a rabbit. And let's say the rabbit is stress, burnout, whatever it is that you're chasing. We're going to take, let's say, 3 of the dogs each time, but it's not 6 dogs, it's now 12, because we have 6 shadow dogs, made up dogs, pretend dogs that are the same data, but they're randomly scrambled. And then you run a race. You just, let's say 3 dogs run a race. The way I explain it to people, a dog might catch the rabbit because it's fastest. But some dogs might catch the rabbit because they're so scared of the other dogs, they run away, like interactions. Or they stink so bad that the other dogs hide and put their nose under the, under the grass. We don't care. Just keep it simple. Which dog caught the rabbit? In other words, which variable sorted it into high and low best? If so, that's a branch on a tree. Now that I've got high and low, is there anything I can do that would create other branches? Can I sort the highs into really high and kind of high, the lows into really low? If so, There's another branch. The reason it's called a random forest is you then do that 3,000 times through the magic of Amazon Web Service, and
Yeah.
and you buy enough computing power, it takes 15 seconds. And then what happens? What happens is, for you, I can say, and man, when we model it, it is rock solid. It never lies to you. If it says it's there, it's there. It will lie to you in model building. Maybe it doesn't, type 2 errors. It may
Okay.
not say something significant that is, but does the clinician care?
No.
I don't care. I'm
No.
building a model.
Yeah.
Just don't lie to me.
Yes.
Don't tell me something's important when it's not. Okay. And it never lies to you when we do simulation studies. So it'll come back through our artificial intelligence, random forest procedure, and it'll tell you which of these variables are the most important for that person with that goal in that period of their life.
Interesting.
Well, then times to apply, if people are doing things that are avoidant, it's blowing up their life, or they're forgetting what their values are, and they're wandering in the wilderness for that person. Let's target that. Let's work on values, or let's, work on cognitive fusion, or let's work on acceptance, whatever it says. So that's where we're going. And
So
the metaphor of a
can I ask you
knot
this?
is a pretty good. It like tells you where to pull in the knot.
So can I ask you this? Because that's a really interesting, and I think it's actually a really great way of showing what a process-based almost approach would be for the human. Because, and I've struggled with this, and I had this question. I wasn't sure if I was going to answer it or ask it, but let's do it. I'm gonna ask this right now. I've always struggled with a lot of ACT protocols that systematically go through like the hexaflex in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. And in this, like you're saying, what is indicating to the person what to pull on is it working for that person? And obviously with a defined goal at the end, that this thing is either getting in the way or it's helping, amplifying those things. It's not algorithmic. It's not like a top-down approach of saying, we're going to go through this. Regardless if you like it or not, regardless if it's impacting or not, but because we have the hexaflex and we even are going to start because, hey, why not? We're going to start with present moment, and then we're going to move to the left, and we're going to go to a willingness and diffusion. That's a really fascinating way of being like what it is for the human, go towards that versus like what it is for a theory or an algorithm, whatever it is that we're going to apply to the human.
Well, if you do the protocol thing alone, you are really hooked by being inefficient. And if I can do a shout out for the first study ever done on ACT, Kirk Strassel is the senior author. Do you know
Okay.
this study?
I don't. I'm really excited right now. No.
All right. Well, it wasn't actually the first done ever done. There was a depression study. We did 4 studies back at the UNCG, but the first one after I came to UNR, and it wasn't quite randomized. It had a control that was matched, but not randomized. But what we did was this, is we trained a group of therapists in psychological flexibility and ACT methods, or another group we didn't. And they had actually recently training in INSU's, oh gosh, I'm blocking on it. What do you call the, the miracle question?
Oh, solution focused?
Huh?
Solution focused or
Yeah, solution
yeah,
focused.
yeah, yeah.
So this was at Group Health of Puget Sound. So the people had recently had training in solution focused, etc., or they were going to go in for an ACT training. And in the ACT training, we got in there. Our main way of training was we trained them on the model. We did this experiential work, is that we would get in there. I'd fly up once a month to Seattle and go down also to Tacoma, etc. And I'd get behind sometimes Kirk and I in there, and I'd just say to the trainees, give us your worst client. Give us the one you have no idea what to do with. Give us the one you're stuck with. Let's get in here. And they'd get the client, they'd come in there, people behind a window, and we have 45 minutes to make magic happen. And, and we were often able to bust it loose. Why? Because we could apply the psychological flexibility model specific for that client. Well, here's how we evaluated it then. We did that training. And then we had already taken all of the clients of those folks for, I think, 3 months, and looked at, were they able to reach their goals, and how many sessions did it take to do it? Okay.
Oh, buddy, I'm excited for this.
Now we do a training, and then we could do the same thing with all their new clients. Perfect. And we showed that people got better, faster, cheaper after the training. Now, what's exciting about this is we have no idea whether or not they're even using the training. We are not telling them follow the protocol. We're not telling them do this, do that. Do. We trained them and we turned them loose, and they were better clinicians. How do we know that? Because their clients got better, faster, cheaper. And so, unfortunately, the psychological flexibility measure, the secretary forgot to send out, and we didn't find that out until we went to
Oh,
data.
bummer.
So we missed the exact process stuff we really were wanting to get to, because we thought what would happen is they were better at moving psychological flexibility.
Yeah.
Now we've got 100 or more mediational analyses showing that that's how ACT works. So it's okay, but and not just with the AAQ, by the way. People sometimes
Yeah, no,
criticize the, oh please,
it's
let's
getting,
not go
yeah,
there.
but yeah, it's tough.
Well, so the first one out of the gate, why does this matter? Every duck in the pen is saying, I need to figure out if my new treatment is worse. So I'm going to do the protocol and I'm going to teach you to follow it no matter what. And
Yes.
session 1 is like this, and session 2 is like that, and session 3, and we have to have compliance and adherence, and we have to make sure, and because otherwise it's too much. And then we'll do a randomized trial. And then if it works, well, then what? You're going to tell every clinician to do that. Do that?
That's what we've done. Yeah.
Follow that protocol? Are you
Right.
kidding me? They may only have 15 minutes. I mean, you train these people to the nines and you assume they had 12 sessions at 1 hour long, and that they would stick with one after another at another. They're not even coming back, because they already know how to do values. What are you talking about? Etc. You're already strong in an area. Why would any clinician target that? Well, if I just turn you loose, you won't.
If I just turned you loose, you won't.
Of course, because you'll see it. You'll know that's not going to give you any traction. So the very first study, we showed that we could do what people usually say after you've proven the method works, then you can get around to why it works. And finally, you can get around to whether or not, when you put it out into the wild, it makes an actual difference. We started with putting it out in the wild, and we knew that it made a difference. Step 1. There's not another approach in psychology that's ever done that, to my knowledge.
Hits me high. And again, I have this moment of I'm just so freaking grateful for this conversation. And it's I don't know, all the different words: validating, thoughtful, assumption challenging, like all these different things. So let me ask you this, because this comes up regularly. I have the privilege of going to like train people to do like, primary care behavioral health, and, trying to teach them about how to approach visits and stuff like this. Like, if there was one thing, and maybe it might not be a functional question, so don't have the limits of the question and hold us to that, but what would you train people to do? Like, if you were telling someone, and this could maybe be even for people in grad school or people on internship or people that are just helping new professionals, whatever it be, what would be the thing that you would start with? What would be that thing?
Well, could I answer it this way? How have I done ACT training in all these years? And it's a little bit egoic to say it that way, but I do want to point out there's 1,100 randomized trials. I do want to point out that there's things like the World Health Organization distributes ACT around the world. It's in the Ukraine right now. And go to the WHO website, and it says this approach is good for anybody who experiences stress, no matter what the circumstance or what the condition. I mean, that's not me. That's the World freaking Health Organization. So don't be telling me I'm overstating the evidence. And no, it's based on 5 gold-plated randomized trials done in a way that only WHO could possibly do, because it takes $1 gazillion to do it.
Uh-huh.
Or you want another one? Go to the current issue of Lancet and look at the study where on motor neuron disease, one of the worst diseases you can imagine. It's like an ALS related, sort of like Lou Gehrig's kind of thing, where you gradually lose your motor function. For the first time ever, these 300,000 people around the world, 40,000 of whom die every year and have nothing from from the medical system that can be given to them, their quality of life can significantly improve by a relatively constrained ACT protocol. And Lancet is the highest impact medical journal in the
no
world.
doubt. No doubt.
So look, I'm a little prideful. I'm getting a little dad pride, so saying that. But I'm saying, how did we train this little lab? And then people like when I did that 1986 workshop, the ACT starts in 81. It's just 5 people in my lab. By the time I'm doing workshops, that's 82, 83. By the time I'm doing workshops that have more than 5 people in it or 10 people in it, it's in the mid 80s. In 86 at University of Washington, the first time Kirk and Patty and Neil Jacobson and others saw it. It's evolved. Here's how that training always worked. Learn to read the processes. We actually did qualitative scoring of transcripts to see inflexibility in flight, to detect avoidance, to detect cognitive fusion, to detect problems in attention or wrapped around a conceptualized self, absence of values, inability of mounting behavior change linked to your values. I mean, I'm talking now 84, 85, 86, 87. I mean, talking early work. And what I trained the Robin Walsers of the world, or the Kelly Wilsons of the world, or the Kirk Strassels of the world, et cetera, was to read the processes and target them. So when we got in those rooms, when Kirk and I jumped in there, I've got a video. I think I had to throw it away because I'm not sure I had the permission to keep using it. Maybe Kirk still has it, but with a client who had been diagnosed as borderline and had been in a train wreck of a marriage, etc. And I'm in a session. This is up in Tacoma, I think, in the training program that led to that first ever study of modern ACT, published with Kirk. And we realized how incredibly emotionally avoidant this person is. And so I'm in there and I say, this ottoman right here is your pain. And what I'd like you to do is to touch the ottoman. And she recoils as if there's a snake there. And she said, I can't do it. I can't. I said, well, could we do it for a second? I want you simply to put your hand on top of the ottoman, move it back and forth, and feel it as if you would if you were to take your feelers and feel the pain that you're feeling around what's happened in this abusive relationship that is coming to an end. She was actually getting divorced. And we work through, like, for 5 minutes. She finally reaches out and goes, and then pulls her hand back. Why tell the story? Well, 10 years later, here comes the note to Kirk Strassel about her life and how it evolved from that. And the training program that she took that led her to be a medical technology person in an area I won't say specifically where, but, and that she had gotten married and that her life had evolved, and she's writing a thank you note to Kirk. And I know where it started because I was there to see the moment when, for the first time ever, she chose and found that she could reach out and feel what it feels like to feel pain instead of running away and all these 101 ways, whether it's burning or cutting or avoiding or drugging or all the chaos that can happen. So here's my answer. If you gave me people to train, I would want to train them first experientially so they have a feel on the inside out, then very practically working with people to be able to read and target processes of change. Now I would say, and I want to see, I'm not convinced yet, we haven't done those trials really yet, but see if persons reporting processes of change within their life can give us the snapshot of where on the knot to pull. And if that's true, boy, now I've got it. I don't have to take the 1 or 2 or 3 years it takes to train somebody really good, well, because we have a lot of folks in there who have masters or whatever, and they've hardly seen anybody, and next thing you know, they're out there. I mean, the amount of demand we have is
Oh,
insane. Now we go
absolutely.
to primary care.
Oh, that's the
The amount
thing. Rip
amount of
the
time
thing.
you have.
Yeah, infinite.
Yeah. So you better make it simple. You make it right. And what if you want to get the physicians involved, actually, and you need them to back you up? If they're fighting you, you're not going to be able to do a good job on your primary care integration work. You got to have the team on board.
Oh yeah.
Agree?
Oh my
All
gosh.
right. Well, so can we actually put tech into the room, not to substitute for the therapist and the alliance and the caring professionals, but to empower their
Amplify.
voice and
Yes.
be able to reach out into their 24/7 world. So if I send you a nudge and bump because I know going home for Thanksgiving dinner is going to be really bad because Uncle George is going to rip you because you're gay, I want you, before you open that door, here's a little 1-minute mindfulness exercise if that's what I know what you need. You know, I'm going to have to get out into your 24/7 world, not as a substitute for me, but as an amplification so I can walk with you through your 24/7 world and not just see you 1 hour every 2 weeks and think that that's going to be enough, but also not pull people into, 12, 16, 24 sessions
Right. Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
week.
It's an and. It's an
There's,
and.
there's no country in the world that can mount it. No
No.
country has mounted that. It's just not practical.
We were just I was just doing a training in Indiana. We were talking about this, and it's like, listen, like if we don't change what we're doing, like we'll never meet the demand. Like, well, one, we probably won't ever meet the demand anyway. But the reality though is like if we don't start looking at things differently, we can have all the therapists in the world. It will still never meet the demand, and that's on us. That's because we're continuing to hold on to, and as you said, like just keep putting people more into the skyscraper that we should be like, hey, maybe we should be letting more people in.
Well, one thing I can do, just a little shout out for something, self-help. I don't know that anybody's ever really dug into this, but let's say you give a self-help book that's well targeted to somebody. Do you know most people don't read that from cover to cover?
Hmm.
They don't go to the beginning and all the end. Some people do.
Mm-hmm.
Most people jump around. And if something's boring and doesn't fit, they jump over it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they come back or maybe they don't. Well, okay. How about get out of your mind into your life? First big cross the board self-help book done from an ACT point of view. We had multiple randomized trials of it. It'll give you about 60% of what you get from a course of ACT.
Mm-hmm.
And if, and only if, people do what's in it. You can jump around, but I always say when I give the book to people, as I say, skim it in just a few hours, one day, skim it, set it aside, don't touch it for days. If it whispers to you, like, hey, what about this? And you'll know it, then go back and try to read it. And try to read it cover to cover, but if something is not interesting, doesn't fit, jump it. Make a little note, put a little sticky note, maybe come back to it later. Do what's in there. If you get bogged down, you don't know what to do, here's a free website to go to. And I have a Act for the Public at groups.io that has been going now for almost 20 years.
And what is
And
it again? What's the
called
website? Because
Act,
I'll put that in the link.
it's called Act for the Public at groups.io.
Okay.
Anybody can go there. I tell them lurk and then participate.
Lurk and then
And
participate.
there's really wise people. I've watched them over 10 years' time, people who are just loony, toony, man. They're struggling. And now they're so wise because they can speak from their pain. They can speak from their experience. They're better than having therapists in there. We have therapists
Beautiful.
too. And I read every post, but so do others. But my point being, why is self-help actually pretty darn good? And it is evidence-based self. I think it's in part because it's inherently individualized.
Correct. 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 Yes.
So if we could even do better, I know beforehand which chapters are most relevant. Why? Because I've actually done some work. I can do it by making the reads, and as I get better, I will. I would like to see also, and I'm doing this in the app, the psychological flexibility stuff is inside a thing called PsychFlex. If you go to psychflex.com, it is commercial. Not a penny has come to me. Maybe someday it will. And all the content providers at this point haven't been paid a penny. They're in there because they care about it. And they want to put tools that people can
Oh
use.
yeah.
And they're
Hell yeah.
tiny little things. So if I can sing out one that I just love, Diana Hill and I did a thing called 1 Minute Flex, where I challenged myself to, okay, I got 1 freaking minute. That's it, to make a point. And we're not going to stop till we have 100. We started with 30, now we have 65. They're organized by the processes. And we're if you can just go boom, and then it shows up as a little, HIPAA compliant thing of, you have mail, not even a therapist. And then this app that's free to the clients, only the clinicians are paying for the license, shows up, and you can get it at the Apple Store and stuff, PsychFlex, but there's nothing in it until the provider decides what you need. Boom, it lands just when we need it. This little nudge, can we do better than here's a book, read it, or here's a book, read what's relevant? How about just this? I'm going to send you a few things. Most of them are 1 or 2 minutes long. I'm not going to overwhelm you, but when I do, would you just open it?
Absolutely.
We get reports back from our users that clients for the first time are doing their homework, and they feel as though their therapist is walking with them in their 27
Oh,
world.
oh.
So maybe we can do what I've spent a lifetime doing, of training these amazing clinicians who are now on stage at ACT boot camp and all that kind of stuff. And but allow that to be part of, imagine, for example, if you could be making reads and then you can get feedback from what your clients are saying, that's actually a good read. I think this person is bound up with avoidance, and by golly, my, AI tool tells me this person's bound up by avoidance. Well,
So
then
let's
your
go.
reads are getting better. If I can say something, I know I'm on a rant.
Oh, keep going. This is
Well, the first thing when I'm training clinicians, the first thing I always say is, look, here's the most shocking thing you'll hear, and I want you to hear it in my first lecture. Experience doesn't produce competence, it produces confidence. It's been looked at multiple times, Neil Jacobs and others, in meta-analyses. Time with your butt in seat working with people does not make you better, and that includes all your training. Well, this is a horror. In almost any area of human work, if you work at it and you practice it, you get better. The only places where that doesn't happen is where we get bad feedback. If we get bad feedback, if you were shooting a basket and learning how to shoot a basket, but you were never able to hear or see whether or not it went through the basket, you'd never get better.
You never.
Ever.
Ah, man,
You
it's
need good feedback. What is the feedback clinicians get? Oh, I like you so much. Oh, please let me come. That's dependence, dude. That's not therapy. That's dependence. Yeah, of course they want to be seeing you forever. You're the only person who cares about them or who listen to them. How about teaching them how to have friends? How about helping them to break out of where, that? So if we could go in the direction that people are going in with feedback-informed therapy and so forth, but instead of feedback on whether or not the syndromes change, that's not the right unit. Do the processes change? But even then, the relevant processes for this person's goal change. And that's where I started, teaching people to read the processes and target them. Now I think we can do it with tech, and maybe we can get a whole lot of clinicians out there who are just getting better and better and better the more work they do.
Hope coming forward, right? That there's actually hope that we're, as you said, it seems like a tide is changing, a shift is occurring. I know we're going to get to noon. Damn, I'm going to ask this question real quick. Let me know where your mind goes. Whenever I go to, my wife and I, Bridget, is also a psychologist, whenever we go to dinner with folks, we always try to do this thing. It's called the question game. And we'll go around to each other because there's intentionality trying to produce moments and have connection with the people. So we'll ask questions. One of the questions that I love to ask people is like, what is a moment that was a complete accident that changed everything for you? Like if it doesn't happen, like life is completely, which again, there's some irony because all the moments probably needed to happen to get us here. And is there anything that when you think about your career with ACT or anything, like, is there any moment that your mind goes to like, this was a complete accident. There wasn't an intentionality to it, but if it doesn't occur, things are completely different. I know that's like a completely different question, but I'm just curious, what's your mindset? Like, where do you go with that?
Well, I'm tempted to talk about my moment, my night on the carpet that I talk about in my TEDx talk, where I
Yeah.
hit bottom inside my panic disorder and somehow or another decided instead of running away, I would run in. And, that instead of trying to get out, I tried to get in, and it came to me out of desperation and literally an out of body experience. I'm tempted to go there, but I'm going to go somewhere else. 10 years later, 11, 12 years later, I'm in a room with about 12 people sitting around a table, and they include some of the best known psychologists in the world. David Barlow is sitting there, and really just monsters, And I'm giving a talk on the early work on the Practice Guidelines Coalition that Kirk, I, and others were working on to try to figure out how to create evidence-based information that could be distilled down. Our vision was to get it down to a single sheet. Like, this sheet of paper includes, you can see Kirk's fingerprints on it.
For sure. I was thinking that's exactly.
This single sheet, and we did 4 of them. We actually got some funding from OBSSR, the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research at NIMH. Norm Anderson was the chair of it then and had lived in my house as a graduate student, so it was an easy sell. But Practice Guideline Coalition. Well, anyway, I'm giving this talk about practice guidelines, but how they have to be really, 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 really simple. Don't be giving me a 300-page book, which the federal government was doing. They were starting to produce practice guidelines that would, put you to sleep by the time you got to page 5, never mind learning how to do it. And I, for the first time in years, got hit with a wave of panic.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned around and I looked at my overheads. This is how long ago it was. It wasn't even slides. They were overheads. If some people probably know what those
Oh,
are.
for sure.
Long ago, that's the way things were when you were giving talks. And I'm imagining how awful it's going to be as an ACT guy, a shining star of emotional openness who has a known, I wasn't very public about my panic disorder history, but still, to be able to, because I could feel the wave, I was not going to be able to talk. And I said, no, mentally. And I turned and looked at the overhead, and then somehow in there came a voice that said yes. Like a choice happened. Like, screw it. If they're going to see me fall to the floor and drool on myself, sue me for living. I don't give a shit. And I turned around, and it was hard to say the first few words. And I said the first few words, and then I continued on with my lecture. So, yeah, you want a turning point in my life? That's another one. There have been times in life where the black hole of no opened up, and I spent years down in that hole. I explored it thoroughly. I know every cavern, every little hallway, every little dark room. And I know how much life is in there, which is none. And when I'm walking out now, I always say, when I'm talking about things like this, don't be looking at me as some shining star of psychological flexibility. I'm nothing like that. Talk to my wife. The reason I'm in this field is because I'm so bad at it. And sue me for living. I'm doing a little better. I'm doing a little better. And does that mean that in this very podcast, I may not suddenly now be overwhelmed with anxiety and be unable to talk? I don't know. That could happen. Hasn't happened in a long, long time. That was the last panic attack I had. And that was
Incredible.
in 1997 or 8, something
Incredible.
like that. I'm just pulling it out. And it may happen here. Cool. It'll be really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I definitely get waves of anxiety still. I was on a podcast up in a big tower where I had to wear the earphones that I couldn't even hear myself talk. And I was so, because sometimes the feedback from the mic and stuff, it was so disorienting. I was like, oh, occasionally things like that happen. Fine. I'm using as an example by way of saying, life is going to give us choices over and over and over and over again as to whether or not we turn in a newer and healthy direction that our gut and history tells us, or in an older and superficially safer but lifeless direction. And I make bad choices, but sometimes I've made good ones under duress, and that's an example. So,
I love that, and my gratitude for sharing the story and talking about it. And the last thing I'll end with, a liberated mind. The one quote that I love from it was when you talked about how much you always enjoy when ACT gets labeled as a humanistic
yeah,
approach. And I I really do want to express my gratitude for being able to make something that can get nerdy, can get behavioral, can get all these different things, and it can be humanistic. And I think
yeah,
it's just a very, so I appreciate one, just obviously the decades and the life of work. And I appreciate so much when I read that. I was actually listening to it. I still remember I was doing a float tank actually, and I was listening to the book, and it said that about it, and that just stuck with me so much. So again, I appreciate you putting that in there and the work, and thank you for coming on this, man. I
yeah.
really do
And could I
appreciate it.
just say a comment over that one?
Yeah.
So we have spent a lot of time using our theories and our assumptions and our models and our data as a fence between us and other people.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's time to use it as a foundation instead. If you stand on a firm foundation, you don't need a fence to lean against. Take down the fences, look across to others, have a genuine conversation. And in a genuine conversation, your views may be changed. And so a big part of what I'm trying to do with process-based approaches is create kind of an agora, a place where people can meet. And we're using evolutionary theory. Why? Because almost everybody who's in the life sciences wants to somehow be connected to the one theory without which life science doesn't make any sense. I mean, they do want to be coherent in some way with the evolving systems that we see on this planet, including the individuals and human beings, but also other living creatures. Well, so that by creating that agora and shifting from models and techniques and trademarked things and protocols and all that with all their heroes focused on latent diseases instead of what people really need and want. Okay, with humility, stand in your foundation and have a genuine conversation. So I'm really interested in talking to the humanistic, analytic systems, cognitive, you name it, people out there. And you can kind of see it in what has happened as process-based approach is now spreading out of just cognitive behavior therapy, but into the nooks and corners of psychological interventions sciences. And, people like Peter Fonagy and, the schema-focused people or, the emotion-focused people, Les Greenberg or the late Sue Johnson, you name it. I mean, these are folks who understand the importance of processes and are willing to have genuine conversations about them if you stop, you know, chest beating about how great and grand your particular method or trademark label or whatever is. Instead, start speaking and listening in ways that we can focus on the lives that we serve.
Dare we say, let's be flexible with our theories and our approaches.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I absolutely embrace that. Can you be psychologically flexible even with your own stuff?
You're damn right. You're damn right. I always remember Kirk's. I loved his one quote when we did one of these with him. He said, what did he say? Assumptions can be magnificently helpful, and assumptions can be magnificently unhelpful. And it just, yeah, us clinging to them oftentimes makes it the latter. For sure. So my gratitude again. Thank you for today, and I'll try to put some of the links into the description on the YouTube. And then obviously, I hope people watching this, reach out, ask questions. Like I said at the beginning of this, I'm not saying that I'm sure Dr. Hayes gets more than enough emails every day, but hey, if you have a question for him, maybe reach out because like I did back 14, 15 years ago, it was an incredible experience. So again, my gratitude. Thank you for today.
Take care. Awesome, man.